reality of sickness, old age, and death that can strike at any time. But before we get into that too much, I want to kind of just review or reflect on the larger picture of, our life, or the nature of life, and the cycle of life. And really, life is like an evolution. And if you can follow this sort of train of thought a bit about evolution, let's take Darwin's theory of evolution, or an accepted idea about evolution. Life started as a one-cell organism in the ocean, and then gradually those organisms divided, and with all the different creatures that live in the ocean, and then the ocean got pretty crowded, and then finally one of those creatures poked the head up and said, "Oh, it's crowded down here. It looks like no one's outside here. Let me go outside." So one of those daring ocean beings started crawling outside. Evolution mutated its organs and allowed it to crawl outside. Then it ate up everything on the ground and started looking up in the trees. There's stuff up there. So evolution allowed it to get claws or wings and get to fly and go up in trees and like that. So basically, evolution evolved along similar lines, if you want to read that train of thought, to Darwin and so on. And then there's those animals and dinosaurs, and finally Homo sapiens and human beings. They had to get more ingenious because to fight off enemies or to get new ways of eating. So they started the idea about planting food, and then developed things to hunt with, and so like that evolution gradually grew up until the present time. And largely that evolution has been a kind of a group evolution, and a physical evolution, but also mental evolution too, according to the need. But now as we get up to this sort of end point in evolution, at least as far as earthbound beings are, the scientists have discovered, the human being is the highest point of evolution. Of course, it can be debatable, but anyway, let's assume that. And basically that, again, everybody has evolved according to the particular group that they're in. And the mind basically, the babies follow what the parents do, or learn to do things according to the parents. And so, there wasn't much thinking involved really, because the babies just mimic their parents and believe what the parents teach them, do what they do, and basically they have to conform to the group. Because if they don't conform to the group, then they get sort of ostracized. And basically, up to this point in the evolution, it was called it's called a cyclic evolution. That means a person grows up and they die, and then their mind comes back again to take off, so to speak, where it left off in the last life. And then they live again that life, and the same thing happens again. When they die, their mind is again recycled again, usually back to the point where they left off, with whatever kind of karma and has been accumulated in the unconscious mind. And largely that way of life has been continued through just the nature of survival in order to survive. And like it's in a modern world to survive now, countries have amassed armaments and armies and nuclear bombs in order to, try to survive and protect their country or their race and so on. And basically that has been driven by, greed, hatred, and delusion. And entails a lot of suffering. So, and we find ourselves caught up in that now. And people find themselves, because kind of no fault of our own, the baby just is taught by their parents. And if their parents are just following what their parents and their grandparents and their great-great-great-grandparents, or whatever modern society is trying to teach them, then they just get caught up in that repetitive behavior, even if it involves a lot of suffering. And especially in this modern era where people, believe that what you can get from the outside world is going to bring you happiness. And so people are, focusing their idea of happiness in the outside world and neglected their mind. And so people, most people are afraid to change. But if a person really wants to change, they have to have the courage to kind of step out of the box. And that's what the Buddha did. The Buddha, when he lived in India, he followed what other people were teaching, and he went around listening to all the other the so-called gurus and self-proclaimed saints that thought they had the answer to life and so on. So he followed their teachings, but it really didn't bring him any satisfaction. And so he had the gall, the courage to break out of the box. And here he was a prince, right? And his parents wanted him to be ascend the throne and be a king, but he wasn't satisfied with that. He wanted to, he thought there's more to life than just, eat, drink, and be merry and toil and then just die. So he was thinking out of the box, and he started to think for himself when he sat down under the Bodhi tree and to attain his, enlightenment. So that the evolution so far that, we are a part of, we've been a part of that sort of what is called group evolution. Everybody belongs to a group. Certain race, certain religion, certain political beliefs, and so on. And a person normally doesn't go beyond what the group is thinking, as I mentioned already. So even in our own lives, if you come to that point, people are just kind of beating their head against the wall, trying to find happiness and just following what others have said, but coming up with an empty hand for the most part in terms of really some tangible inner centeredness or awareness or understanding what is the nature of life. Some people say, well, life is just like this, and just believe it and don't ask questions and just, be a good little person and die and have some children and die and don't worry about it. But some people are not satisfied with that kind of a storyline. And the Buddha is one of those. But especially in terms of when we find ourselves caught up in our mind and repeating the same type of habits over and over again, the same kind of thoughts, and with desire, aversion, jealousy, envy, greed, hatred, and just trying to consume everything and trying to find happiness in the external world, we keep coming up with an empty hand. So at some point, people start to question about the nature of what they're doing or the nature of their beliefs. And so this started back sort of at the time of with the hippies in the 60s. I'm talking about the modern era, right? So the hippies started, they heard bits and pieces of Indian gurus and Buddhist monks, talking about nirvana and cosmic consciousness and all this. And they, wow, what's that? I haven't heard that before. And so they started to, get some interest in some of those things. Or they started taking drugs and, experiencing different states of mind, and understanding that the mind is a much more powerful thing than what the normal society tends to believe. And the promise of, being able to, take your life into your own hands rather than just believing in a savior, praying to a savior to save you, or some different ideas like that, right? So when a person starts to, question what they're doing in life, it takes a lot of courage. And gradually the spiritual path is basically making a transition from the group evolution to the individual evolution. That means the group is done as much as they can for us. The way our society is running, it's done as much as they can because they're limited by their beliefs. But the Buddha challenged those beliefs and saw that there's something more to life than just the normal sort of idea about life, or when you die, you're just going to disappear or something, and or just to enjoy life before you die by any means. So the spiritual life basically involves a lot of courage to start challenging, just as the hippies did, right? They wanted to grow their hair and do this and that, and then the parents were afraid of that, or the government was afraid of that, and they were going to lose control of their, people, and so of course the hippie thing was one thing. It petered out because that was also not grounded in some systematic process, and then so basically when a person wants to change, then they've come to their wits' end. They've done everything that they could possibly do to try to be happy, but still they haven't heard the right information yet. And so they start inquiring, as I just mentioned, and people are inquiring and trying out different religions or therapies or meditation practices, and they start practicing things. But now they're taking their life into their own hand. And it may mean being ostracized by even your own family, because people are afraid of change. Most people are afraid of change. And if they see somebody else changing, that's scary to them, because now they have to think about their self, what they're doing. And most people don't want to do that. It's easier just to keep in the same repetitive patterns over and over again, even if it's painful. Some people just acquiesce to that and just accept that that's their lot. But the Buddha didn't do that. So therefore, in the practice of the Dhamma, but we have to find a path. Now people are searching for a path to freedom, and especially in this country where you have access to so many things, and people are hearing from so many different religions. Each religion is promising their instant path to salvation. Believe in this God or that God, or do this things and that things, and you'll reach nirvana or something. So and people, so they dabble, and they go around trying different things, and they have some sincere interest, but because there's no firm grounding, they've only read bits and pieces about different things. Oh, you should become a vegetarian, that's spiritual, or follow the 5 precepts, or practice watching your breath, or chanting these mantras, or wearing these special kind of clothes. And so people have been, since the hippie time, people have been trying that and dabbling this and that, thinking that they should be able to quickly master something or quickly make progress, because the Western mind is used to getting everything quickly, right? You push a button and you get it out. You put 50 cents in the vending machine, and your candy bar pops out. Or in the old days, the dial-up internet service, and it took 5 minutes to get a connection. So people complain that's not fast enough. So now it's up to 5G, and they want instant, connection, and you want everything faster.
Nice one, climate.
And so the same idea comes to spiritual life, or the idea of attaining nirvana or liberation. They think that just going on one retreat, a 3-month retreat or a 10-day retreat, they should be able to master their mind. But the mind is harder to change than the material world. Now, the whole system of computers and IBM machines started in the 60s, up now, maybe 60 years to evolve, all the gadgets and things manipulate the material world, resistors and all these other electronic things. But the mind is not so easy to manipulate. So anyway, the Dharma teaching is that you have to find a systematic practice. So people were their practices kind of come off and on, so to speak. They practice for a few months, and if they don't get any instant satisfaction, they stop practicing, and then maybe they try something else, and they try that for a while, and then they stop, and then their mind starts getting confused again, and they grab these religions and philosophies like some kind of a crutch, just when they're feeling bad. And so, the spiritual life also kind of just keeps going around in circles, at least for the most part, because the practice is haphazard. It's not regular, it's not systematic, it's not grounded in in reality. It's a lot of times it's based on just some whims and fancies or nice sounding ideas, but without any really bedrock grounding that people can, actually feel and do themselves. So that's what, how the Buddha's predicament too. And when he attained his enlightenment, that's why he developed the Noble Eightfold Path. Because the Noble Eightfold Path is very systematic. It's step by step. Most Westerners, they want everything instantly. They want to just jump to the highest point real quickly. And they think, I don't need that stuff. That's kindergarten stuff. They just want to, jump to the highest thing. And that's why many of them fail. And so sometimes we have to go back to the beginning. We have to go back and learn our ABCs of the spiritual life, of the path of evolution. And in the Dharma teaching, that ABCs, where the first point is taking refuge. As we've already learned, and we recited in the refuge, the 3 refuges, that gives us something to really anchor our mind in, especially refuge in the Dhamma, that practice. And, make a commitment. These days, a lot of Westerners, they don't like to make commitments. They think that's going to tie them down. In one way, that may be all right, but in terms of the spiritual practice, if you don't really make a firm commitment, then you get easily swayed by other people. They say, oh, the Buddha, try this other guy, he's better, and, people have these doubts. And, so you have to make a commitment, because the practice doesn't come quickly. And it's like digging a well. If you dig somebody says, oh, you want to find water, go dig a well here. So a person digs down 3 feet, but they don't find water. They say, oh, there's no water here. But he only dug down 3 feet. But, he goes and tries to another place, and digs down a few feet, doesn't find water. Oh, there's no water here. He keeps going all over, digging shallow holes and never finds water. So instead, one has to keep digging until you hit the water, underneath. It was always there under your feet, but you didn't dig deep enough. So that systematic practice and the taking refuge, and then so the Noble Eightfold Path is the systematic practice, because it's based in the reality about the right understanding. So right understanding is the first stage of the practice. That means the Buddha didn't want us to do anything without understanding what we're doing and why we're doing it. As opposed to some other kind of philosophies that just say believe this and do this and don't ask too many questions and so on. So the right understanding is like a road map. If you want to go from, let's say, Maryland to Columbus, Ohio, then it's good to have a road map. Some people say, I don't need a map. They jump in their car, and open a can of beer with a joint or something, get on the freeway, and then they miss the turnoff. And then they wind up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama or someplace. Or worse, getting wrecked. So the Buddha drew the road map, because to follow a map, it should be made by a map maker, somebody who knows the path, right? And he knows the right way to go, and to avoid the pitfalls, or to avoid the detours, or to avoid the rocky roads, to take the direct path. So the right understanding is that path toward, liberating the mind from greed, hatred, and delusion, and weakening the shackles of our ego-bound consciousness to attain mental liberation. And so right understanding, I already mentioned this last night in the talk, I think, has 3 levels, right? So the intellectual level, where you read books or hear a lecture, but then you have to go on thinking about it. And so in your meditation, even, you contemplate these things that you've read about, and observe how karma is working in your mind, how greed, hatred, and delusion, and all the strong habits that our mind has gotten into. We can see that and go, oh, and so it makes becomes a deeper level of understanding. But anyway, you have to go on thinking about what you read, and developing right thought. So right thought is the second step of the Eightfold Path, and there's 3 parts to that, which is the thought of non-greed, the thought of non-hatred, or non-cruelty, and the thought of non-greed basically means lightening up, non-cruelty and or non-ill will and non-cruelty. So those three thoughts of non-greed, of non-ill will, and non-cruelty. These are the things that you can see. Greed, ill will, and cruelty are the things that cause most of the suffering in the world. And people their minds are so deeply caught in that greed, hatred, and delusion. So thinking about how great it would be to be free from greed, hatred, and delusion, and meanness and anger and hatred, cruelty, and so even cruel speech. So these kind of right thoughts, they're all thoughts about the Dhamma. Because anywhere you look in the Buddha's teaching, he's talking about weakening that craving and overcoming ill will and hatred, developing metta and compassion and wisdom. So we go on thinking about that in our life even. And also the thought of non-greed, or actually it's called the thought of lightening up, or downsizing. I like to use the word downsizing. So most of people's lives are too much entangled, accumulated so many things in their life. Their houses are full of all kind of heirlooms and things, hand-me-downs, and they have all this stuff that they accumulated since childhood, and they have to spend a lot of time cleaning it, protecting it, or tripping over it, trying to find other things. Or they have a huge house. They might have had some children, and the children go out of the house. Now the person or a couple finds themselves in a big house. It takes a lot of effort to clean and so on. So it involves a lot of mental stress, protecting and cleaning and all these things that we've accumulated. So to downsize, think about to let go and make the life more simple. So that's a part of the right thought. Because when a lot of times they come to a retreat, you want to sign up for a retreat. Oh, you want to sign up for a 10-day retreat? So they sign up. And then a couple of days before the retreat starts, they call up and say, oh, one of my 5 cats got ill and I have to stay home and give it injections every day, so I can't come to the retreat. Or I can't find somebody to house sit to water my 50 plants. Or so many other reasons connected with, they have too many things that they can't leave. And because I've heard all these myself, because I run retreats, right? And I get your emails and phone calls. Even to this retreat, there was at least several people who had these kind of excuses. So therefore, that lightening up and downsizing. So when you really want to do something that you want to do, there's not all these things sort of tying you down. And then there's the right speech. So once you got your right view, your right understanding, and right thought in place, then it's about cleaning up your karma, especially with the tongue, with the mouth, and the speech. So much suffering arises because of our wrong speech, telling lies, slandering other people, talking behind their backs. And they find out, and they're going to be angry at you. And then the harsh speech, cruel speech, and useless speech. So all these types of speech create a lot of karma that comes back to us in our life. And then the right action, by living by the precepts, to refrain from hurting others, to overcome the cruelty to others, and not to refrain from killing or harming other living creatures, even the smallest types of animals or even insects. So we kind of value that life. So it makes the mind more gentle and less arrogant. We identify that the same life force that causes our heart to beat, the breath to go in and out, is the same life force in an ant or a cockroach or a spider. So that they also have the right to live. So anyway, they're following the sila, the precepts. The right action and the right livelihood. That means gaining your livelihood by in a way that wouldn't cause you to break any of those previous precepts. So we know that these days there's a lot of jobs where people are kind of forced into having to compromise their precepts, because companies make products that are not healthy for people, but they don't tell them that, or they tout all these other things but don't mention bad things, or just outright cheating, like lying for your income taxes and so many other things you all know. So then you have to come home and you have to live with yourself at night. I usually give the example of a secretary, keeping the books for a large corporation. And they're trying to practice the Dhamma, and, keeping faithful books and so on. But then the boss comes by and looks over their shoulder and says, why don't you change that 5 million to just 50,000? The secretary goes, what? That's not honest. Well, there's 10 people waiting for your job. And so they feel obligated or forced into doing something that they know they shouldn't do. So that's why the right livelihood, especially young people, when they're growing up and they decide to take some job, they ought to really consider, what they're going to do, and the kinds of things that those jobs entail. That anything that would break any of the precepts, like any type of jobs that would be making weapons and poisons, or slaughtering animals, and so many things, vices that promote vices, and other things that are harmful for people. So when you go home at night, you can think, today I didn't harm a flea. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything dishonest. I didn't tell any lies. I didn't, cheat or whatever. So you can sleep at night. That's what causes so much mental suffering, is guilt, worry, remorse, and fear for having done things like that, having broken the precepts. Thinking, worrying about am I going to get caught? Who's going to catch me for telling that lie, or sleeping with their friend, or whatever, stealing something. So that's why the right livelihood is for somebody who's really interested in the spiritual path, to free their mind, to try to find a job that wouldn't subject themselves to perhaps having to do some of those things. So those 3 steps of the Eightfold Path, the right speech, right action, right livelihood, these belong to the group called the Sila, or the skillful living, the skillful behavior. That's in accordance with the precepts, and that's in accordance with the Dhamma, about non-greed and non-cruelty, and non-ill will. And then the last 3 steps of the Eightfold Path are the right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And these belong to the Samadhi group, or the group of, is normally translated as concentration, but it's better as a mental composure. That means composing the mind, tranquilizing the mind, get it to come and rest more and more in the present moment, rather than always being obsessed and engrossed with trying to control the future, or pining over the past, and so on. So that basically means the practice of meditation. So I talked about this yesterday, the 3 groups of Sila, Samadhi, and Panya, and how they work to weaken those powers of craving, grasping, and becoming. So yesterday I talked about those three stages of dependent origination: craving, grasping, and becoming. And so the becoming means the creation of the karma, the actions that you do minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, which keep accumulating the habits, especially the negative ones. And so the sila is what helps to weaken or slow down the accumulation of the negative karma by following these basic rules of at least the five precepts, or those eightfold path precepts. And then the practice of meditation helps to weaken the grasping. That means our neurotic thoughts. Thoughts that just are all over the place, and thoughts about desire and aversion. Because when you meditate, those thoughts get tranquilized and come to rest in the present moment. And then the mind becomes very happy and free from all that kind of tension of all that neurotic thinking, at least for some time. So I've already talked about this last night, so I'm not going to go into it too much more. And then it's only then how those three levels of wisdom develop, going from the intellectual wisdom. And then in meditation, we're developing the reflective wisdom, like reflecting in the meditation. We could even think about like the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, about karma. These are kind of thinking meditations, but they're very powerful. And then finally, the deeper levels of the insights that we mentioned in those four stages of insights. So, but the practice needs to be regular. And that's why most people, they use meditation as a kind of a crutch. Meditation, when they're feeling bad, then they're going to meditate more. And then when things come up in their life, it's easy to let go of the meditation. So that practice needs to be regular. But when you come on a retreat, so people get enthused. Like, how many of you now got through this retreat, got a little bit more motivation, and you're thinking, when I go home, I'm gonna, try to meditate every day, twice a day, do a little yoga. Anybody have these thoughts in their mind? Okay, so that's good. But when you go home and you don't have any group support, or nobody else in your family meditates, then maybe for the first few days you'll get up in the morning and do a little mukha bhastika, little lion's roar, sit to meditate, and maybe twice a day for a few days. And then little by little, the pressures of life come up, and people start saying, "Oh, work for me this next week, I'm going on vacation," or people start demanding more of your time, and you feel tired at night, so you give up the evening meditation. Usually that's what happens. You come home tired and you just want to, jump in the bed or watch a flick or something, or drink some beer or wine. I don't know, but the ordinary people. But anyway, that evening meditation goes out the window. And then a few more days or weeks go by, and then for whatever other reasons, that 45-minute morning meditation drops down to 30 minutes. And a few more days or week, that 30-minute meditation drops down to 15 minutes. And then before you know it, you're swigging down the last bit of coffee, going out the door, and you pat the Buddha on the head and say, "Namo Buddhaya, you meditate for me." And that's all your meditation. Because I've seen that happen with a lot of people, and even to myself in the earlier days, but especially quite a lot of people. So they use meditation as a kind of a crutch. You have to go to the item principles. I think another lady is going to be coming shortly. It was Suba Alut Arudu Uewa. So, what's to be done in that case? You find yourself, not being able to have the energy to, faithfully kind of sit every day, because you saw how the daily meditation helped you, right? And from the first day until like last night, most of you said every day your meditation got a little bit better, right? And that's the way it normally should be. But because people's schedules get interrupted by so many things. And it's very funny. Meditation seems to be the first thing out the window. Out of all the things you have to give up, it seems that meditation is the easiest one to give up. You don't want to give up your, weekly basket weaving class or your weekly 12-step program. I mean, I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm not saying that shouldn't be done. But, the people that have the priority, usually meditation is the first one to let go. Because they think that's selfish. Oh, these people need my help. Meditation is not selfish. Meditation is helping others. Because when you help yourself, that means when you weaken your own greed, hatred, and delusion, you're doing things for others. That means you're not causing them problems and you're helping them in an indirect way. So this idea that meditation is selfish is itself a selfish notion by people who don't understand it. But anyway, so for people that find themselves in that situation, then there's a new kind of meditation that we've come up with, and that is the M&M. And an M&M is a minute meditation. People hear a minute meditation and go, oh, wow, I like that. 1 minute, yeah, I can do 1 minute. But an M&M is a specific practice in where you train yourself to stop once an hour. You stop in your tracks, freeze in your tracks, whatever you were doing, finish one job before you rush to something else, just stop and come to the body and take 1 to 3 deep, slow breaths. As I mentioned before, and I hope that you had been feeling that even taking 1 deep, slow breath where you hold the air in the lungs 4, 5, 6 seconds, almost instantly relaxes a lot of whatever tension you might have been having, or cuts out the thought of whatever your mind was chewing on at the time, because it takes all of your energy to take a deep, slow breath, hold it in, and just come to the body. Just remind yourself, standing, breathing, standing, breathing. By the time you let out that breath, or you take 3 of those breaths, you might have forgotten what you were angry about, or other useless thoughts you might have been doing. So it's like touching base with the present moment. And then you continue what you were doing. But in that 1 minute, you can also reflect on the last hour. If you're holding some ill will or resentment towards somebody, forgive them. Rather than holding on to these negative thoughts about people, usually what they did to you, maybe they crossed in front of you, or they, whatever. Mostly of it's because of speech, but forgive them by saying, okay, this person might have said this to me, or did this. Well, they themselves have their own sufferings, and it's not really them that's doing it. It's just our habits, just like I have bad habits, and they have bad habits, and so you're able to give them a break. Instead of plotting revenge, how you're going to get even with these people, or go tell tales about them and so on. You just try to forgive them, and then also forgive yourself. Maybe you're the one that did something. maybe you said something rough to a colleague, or maybe your children, or something. And so you can forgive yourself, knowing, okay, I did that. Let me be more mindful next time. And so, that's the way that you can use that 1 minute to a very constructive purpose in terms of the Dhamma, and then continue. But you try to do that every hour. Just doing it once or twice a day is probably not going to have much effect. It's like collecting raindrops from a roof, a gutter. Just 2 or 3 raindrops are not going to be enough to drink or wash your hands. But if you get several hundreds of them, then there'll be enough to use for something. So in the same way, we have to train ourselves to do that every hour. But in a 12-hour day, every hour, or 15-hour day that most people have, there's 15 minutes of meditation, quality meditation. Because in a 1 minute, anybody can concentrate for 1 minute, really. Just taking 2 or 3 3-part breaths is already 1 minute. So there shouldn't be any excuse why people can't stop for 1 minute in an hour, because we waste so much time usually anyway in an hour. If you recollect your life, people sitting in offices, in between their work, they're ordering things online, or they're looking up this and that. And maybe that's what I've read about people in offices, on computers in their cubicles, when the boss isn't working. They're talking and sending emails, and probably 2 or 3 hours that people might spend in non-work related things, right? So most of it's probably not that productive. So that's why these M&Ms, there shouldn't be any excuse why a person couldn't do that. But the problem is remembering, not doing it. It's remembering to do it, because our mind is always a jump ahead of ourselves. So also the practice of the body awareness is one of the most powerful and immediate types of meditation that you can do. I mean, people think of meditation, you're sitting in a quiet place and concentrate, and anything's a disturbance, or noises. You get upset if people are making noises. So that's why that kind of meditation is not really very productive, or a person cannot really make progress in that kind of meditation. But because we have the body with us at all times, at any moment, once you've trained yourself, just stop and pause, boom, the body's right there, the outline of the body. It's not far away, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch. It's right there. Your nose, your face. It's not far away. And you just have to stop. And it's there. If you have to train yourself to do it, but it's not that difficult. Now, how many of you in this last 4 days tried that, and see if it's getting easier and easier to, even when you're standing or even in the walking, you're able to kind of, at least in a general way, is maybe not perfect yet. It takes a lot of practice, but still that ability just to feel the sensation of the head there, and the arms, the clothing touching the skin, feet touching the floor. And that immediately brings all your other Dhamma understanding, it crystallizes it in that moment. And then you can more easily see that, you can see the urge, because when you're stopping for 1 minute and you hear a noise, you can see the urge to want to open your eyes, who's making that noise, or the urge to do something. And you can see the urge clearly because you're stopped. So normally when we're moving at the same time, we're always moving, and our mind is moving with the body, or usually ahead of the body, we can't really see the mind. But when the body stops, standing, and the mind's moving, there's a space there. Now you can actually see the mind, the thoughts, because the body's here and the mind is there thinking. So you can much easier see your thoughts when you are, make that pause and come to the body and hold the attention on the body. You can more clearly see thoughts and urges. And you just tell yourself to relax, and then continue with moving. So anyway, this is really the practice of Dhamma. This is where the rubber meets the road. Because it's out there in your daily life, in your office, out there in your car, driving around, going shopping, any number of things with your relatives on a reunion, lunch. That's when people create most of karma, especially by speech or other things, actions. So it's because people are not grounded and alert to their actions that they do that. But doing this every minute, every hour, stopping for a minute, it's the habit, the repetition of the habit that's important. If you just meditate once a day, there's 14 hours or more when you're not very mindful. So that's a long period of time. And usually the effects of one meditation are going to wear off in 2 or 3 hours if you don't have a supplemental practice of keeping the body in mind, of maintaining at least some modicum of awareness to the body. Because it's always right there. We're moving our arms, turning our head. Just remember, be aware of eyes, turning, okay. Sometimes do a little bit more slowly, looking, okay, seeing that, okay. Coming back. It's very beautiful and very, very peaceful. But you can only appreciate that when you practice. And so that's really, to me, that's when the most beneficial practices, apart from going on a long, maybe retreat, that's one of the most beneficial types of practice for the, in everyday life, because it gradually accumulates where you're almost constantly have this awareness of the body, and it's like the awareness becomes more almost permanently established to a certain extent. And then it becomes much easier to catch yourself when you feel yourself kind of speeding up. And, okay, relax, slow down. When you catch yourself speeding around or getting confused, just stop. Take a deep, slow breath. Everything comes back into place. So that's really what I would like to encourage you to do this in this coming year, if you're making New Year's resolutions. To make a resolution, if you can't maintain, and even if you do 2 hours of meditation a day, or 30-minute meditations, you do some longer meditations, but these M&Ms in between will supplement that, so that when you do meditate again in the evening, you don't have to battle so much your mind and the stress, because you'll be relieving stress hour by hour during the day doing these M&Ms rather than accumulating every hour. And so then hopefully you would feel like doing a longer meditation in the evening. And when you do an evening meditation, your sleep will probably be better, because you can release that stress and tension from the day that hopefully then won't come in and disturb your sleep, thinking about that person, get even with that person. And then you may feel like getting up earlier to meditate. So, it's a cycle. Everything is kind of interconnected. So that's what I would like to suggest and encourage you to do in this coming year, if you're not already doing that. But even if you have been doing it a little bit, there's always room for improvement. So I think that's the main thing that I wanted to leave with you for this the last part of this retreat, first day of the new year. And now still have a few minutes left. I think somebody actually wrote a question down here already, so there is a question. You know if another lady pulled up for Donna? Because that's the lady who was not bringing the main Donna. Some of there's another lady who's going to bring it. This question, how or what would you suggest to introduce our children to the meditation or Dhamma? Well, it's very difficult, to teach children the Dhamma because their minds are, as you all know, pretty flighty, and their minds are growing, and they want to learn everything, and there's a lot of energy. But children normally imitate their parents. So if they see the parents practicing Dhamma or meditating every day or walking slowly, they might be curious and say, why are you doing that? And then you might be able to explain them. But usually it's not until they're probably around 11 or 12 maybe. But kids are different, and so even I've seen 3 or 5-year-old kids meditating. It's probably because they brought it with them from a past life, perhaps. But generally, if you expose the kids to Dhamma, even if they don't really get it at that time, you expose it to them, like from time to time, talk to them about the importance of, especially like precepts, teaching them 5 precepts not to harm or kill little bugs, and have to respect life. That's a very important thing. And there are some children's books too. You can find them on the internet. Children's books for Buddhist children, or even the Jataka stories. And there are some books that usually have a moral to it, a nice moral about some situation in the life of the Buddha, which is explaining different aspects about morality and so on. But the children, if they're exposed to the Dhamma, at least like you bring them to the temple and they see what a Buddha statue is, and you see people meditating, and kind of they at least have some general idea. And when they get a little older, like in their 20s, and their mind gets a little bit more mature and they have a little bit more experience in life, then they might come back to it. Especially now because they heard that meditation is being very popularized these days, and media and other things, and celebrities are practicing meditation, things like that. So people are having more exposure to it, and they might come back to it when they get older. But it can be difficult to. But mainly, you have to set the example for the children. And hopefully they'll learn, or gradually get exposed to it. But because their other environment is not exposed, like they go to school and the kids, and they usually get more influenced by school culture and what the kids are thinking and doing than what the parents are trying to teach them, right? So it can be difficult. Did you see anybody come?
I don't see another card near the approach street.
Can you just go down and check it? Does anybody out there listening on Zoom have a question? Anybody else here? Yes,
Maybe
Peter?
it's a silly question. I'm just interested in that photo downstairs where you were with a bunch of Western monks. That cohort of monks, what happened to them?
Which one?
There's a photo down where you're
There's
alms-
4 monks in there.
Yeah, there's 4 monks and you're begging for alms, walking, and
Well, the lead monk is dead, because that picture was taken 30 years ago. So he died a couple of years ago, the one that was in front of me. The 2 behind me were just some young Swiss guys who had come to Sri Lanka, and somehow they got an interest to be a monk. But they gave it up after a while. You can see in the picture they were not very, didn't look very mindful. In that picture, I'm walking very kind of concentrated, and they're kind of laughing and looking around. So they had disrobed after, I don't know how long, maybe 1 or 2 years. And so that's what happened to them. And that's what happens to a lot of Westerners who become monks. There's a very high dropout rate because, there's a fantasy about being a monk, and they think it's just about going to a cave and leaving the world and just, within a few months, maybe entering samadhi and all that. But it doesn't always pan out that way. And so a lot of them, their old karma comes up, their pent up desires. If they become a monk too young and without experiencing a lot of life, then you can repress some of those, natural urges and instincts, especially for relationships and other things like that. And so that comes back to derail a lot of the younger guys who become monks.
Sorry for another silly question. What will be the path for female?
What?
For a female, if female would like to do something more in depth.
There's a chance now for women to become female monastics, and you just have to find them. There's a couple out in California, and there's here and there the odd nun. Like down in North Carolina, Sister Sudama is down there, and she has a little house, and she runs a little center, and Sister Sudina or Aya Sudina. And there's a number of them that have their own little centers. You just have to find them and go there. And, not all of them may allow you to get ordained and so on, but out in California, I think there's more chance for that. But there are possibilities if you really have the motivation to do it. Or you could go to Asia and do it as well.
She's here, finishes it up. Come down.
If you want to do a puja,
I didn't even ask her.
why don't you ask her about that? Tell her if she wants to, because if not.
Otherwise, you could come down in 5 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So. But every year there's ordinations. Usually they're held out in California, but there was one here just in Winchester, Virginia, just 2 months ago. I participated in it. 2 ladies were ordained as female monastics. Yes.
One last question. There's all these spiritual, teachers on YouTube these days. There's a plethora of different traditions and teachers. Is it possible to kind of contextualize where they are in the path based on looking at the stage of enlightenment, Theravada frame, and then try to apply it to what they talk about, or is it better not to?
Well, one could do that. I mean, there are certain parameters that define, if a teacher is teaching the Dhamma and then, in his life he's, kind of got skeletons in the closet or, doing other things. And we see that they get caught all the time. There's so many scandals that involve, spiritual teachers. Like even I mentioned a Bikram yoga, that was a big scandal. This big yogi, and he was caught in scandals. So with Tibetan lamas and so many, because they might be teaching an outer thing. They're teaching in order to get fame or make money. Some of them, fortunately, but so they have some ulterior motives or they haven't practiced enough interior cleansing in themselves that they can avoid these pitfalls of name, fame, and all the lures that come with that. So, yeah. But usually you have to, know a person for a long period of time to have an idea of. People can hide things for a certain amount of time, but at some point it's going to come out because those habits are very deeply, ingrained, and they'll come out at some point if they don't have a high level of mindfulness in order to restrain it.
the project. She's finishing up, so maybe
Does she want to leave? Like
she'd like to offer to you.
okay.
So maybe
Okay,
we'll find-
friends, so that will bring this retreat to an end now. And again, I wish you all the best in the new year, as well as all the ensuing years after that. And if you've learned anything during this retreat, any little tidbits of like 3-part breath, oh my gosh, I'm breathing. Or, you know, a yoga stretch or meditation, you know, outline of the body, M&Ms, walking meditation, you know, all these little things we put out there, and some people will you know, use them, and some people won't. But anyway, it's the way it is. So just a few kind of housekeeping things. If you used anything from the meditation center, like you know, pillowcase or sheets or anything else, that take them off of your bed. I know there's a few people staying here at least another night or two, so you don't have to do that now. But for those who are leaving today, bring them down to the laundry room. And then also just tidy up, you know, your area, bathroom, make sure everything is neat and clean.
Also, there is some left laundry in the laundry room. So just check if you're missing something.
Well, you said there was a pair of blue jeans or something put into John
But-
Haywood's dryer or something.
Yeah. But yeah, it's in the laundry.
Everybody lost a pair of blue jeans checking.